Welcome to a brand new edition of Problematic Women, a podcast that empowers right-minded women. I'm Kelsey Bolar, formerly known as Kelsey Harkness, your host for today's show. I'm here with a group of DC-based women. Kat Nikas, an attorney here in the District of Columbia, Brianna Herlihy from Alliance Defending Freedom, and my colleague at the Daily Signal and new Problematic Women co-host, Lauren Evans.
We want to start out by thanking our listeners for your kind words of love and encouragement throughout these past few very difficult months. For those who didn't know, Problematic Women went on a 3-month hiatus after losing our podcast co-host, Bre Payton, on December 28th of last year.
Bree passed away from a sudden illness and is survived by her parents, George and Cindy, her siblings, James, Jack, Christina, and Cheekie, and her boyfriend, Ryan Colby.
Today, we're dedicating this entire episode to remembering Bree.
We decided to do this because we felt that as a society, we could probably do a better job about talking about grief and moving forward in the wake of such sudden tragedies. Sadly, the women you'll hear from today aren't the only ones who have ever lost somebody that they've loved. So first, I'll be joined by some of Bree's closest friends and former roommates, Kat and Brianna. And later on, her mom Cindy will be on the line, who will help us remember Bree and give us an update on how her family is doing. To all of you listening, thank you for being with us on this difficult but very important journey.
From here on out, our usual show will publish once a week every Thursday morning and focus on women's issues and current events. We'll feature rotating hosts with diverse perspectives on what it means to be a conservative woman in today's culture, something that we all know isn't easy these days.
First, let's talk about Bree. Kat, Brianna, and Lauren, thank you for joining us. I want to start out by asking, what has been the hardest part for you about losing Bree, and how have you learned to deal with that?
I think it's been a process more than, I ever thought. Every time that, I think about it, I just think of what a blessing it was to have known her for the time that we did and to share. We got really close really fast living together, and we talk about it all the time as being, we were a family, in a lot of ways. I've never lost someone who has been so close, especially close in age. We were, similar in a lot of ways. So really just the process and sort of even being gentle with myself and with the people around me who also, you all even, who knew her closely. And so again, recognizing the process, and I would say one of the biggest things for me that's been so helpful is just the community. Bree touched so many people from on a professional level, everybody that she worked with, the stories that she would tell about the, fellow journalists that she would talk to, that reached out to us. Sort of we were connected to them, through Bree after she died, to the makeup artist at Fox, to the concierge in our building who reached out to us in email. To my shame, I didn't know her name, but Bree did. And so she reached out to us, after the fact, and, and just offered, kind words. And so that's been so important and so honestly helpful and heartwarming to me. Just the community, that Bree loved was so big. And so, I feel in a way, I hate that it's in these circumstances, but to be close to this community has been such a huge help, and just in what's just been, such a tragedy, and processing through that all.
Absolutely. And I have to say, over 3 months later now, I still have basically strangers bringing up Bree to me. Just the other day, I was on the way to Fox News to do a show, and my driver asked me how I was doing because he knew I knew Bree, and he also told me a story of how he went through a very difficult medical situation in a hospital in Washington, D.C. He shared that with Bree, and Bree was actually looking into it to see if there's anything she could have done.
That's like Bree.
And
wow.
for those stories, more than 3 months later, to keep pouring in, it warms my heart, and it reminds me of how many lives Bree touched. Kat, you're Bree's other roommate. How are you doing?
I think the hardest part is not only losing an amazing friend, but also, trying to live well, like Bree did, while also trying to grieve well. So one of the things that I've noticed was you're trying to work, you're trying to still make it and to interact with other people who may not have known Bree or don't really know maybe what's going on or how to talk about it, but there's almost a solace in that. There's almost a comfort in the schedule, because you still have to live your life. You're still called to live your life well and to get the job done. And so I think the hardest part is trying to live those two lives, because people are relying on you. There's still chaos. This is DC, so there's a lot going on at all times, but you're trying to grieve with also trying to live well. And I think that's something that Bree did really well, was live well. Mm-hmm. Everyone talks about life as a gift. And I think it's so easy, at least for me, to say, yeah, life is a gift. Sure, life's a gift, especially in the pro-life world. Life is, that's almost a tagline in a good way. Life is a gift. Yes. But what does it mean to actually have the gift of life and to live life like it's a gift? That's where Bree comes in, and that's where her memory always just sort of comes up and hits me is, she really did live life like it was a gift. She was a gift to others. She was hope to others. She never took anything for granted. She would have food waiting for us when we got home from work. I tried to have food one time, and I tried to convince Brianna and Bree to have some of my food, which didn't look very, very appetizing, but they still took a look at it and kind of gave me an aw, that's sweet.
In a very Bree way.
In a very
no, thank you.
I'm okay. But she just did everything so well, and so the hardest thing is just trying to live life well, knowing that a big part of it is just never going to be the same.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kat. It's you're sad and you're at work, you're at the store, and it's not on your mind. And then I'll see somebody at the grocery store. It's like this beautiful woman with dark hair, and you like in your head you're like, oh my gosh, is that you just like forget for a moment, and then you see a picture of her, or you like every time I walk in this podcast studio, it's just like this feeling of happiness, and you think of like how lucky was it that we got to know this person. But it reminds you like she's gone and she's not coming back. And it's just this feeling of like you want to get this feeling away and you want to keep it. And it's this, and that's what I've kind of learned about grief too, is it's this double-edged sword pretty much across the board, where you feel guilty when you aren't sad. You feel guilty when you are sad. Mm-hmm. You want to talk to everybody about it. You want to keep it close to your vest. And yeah, I just think, reflecting on, who Bree was as a person and how she is looking down from us from heaven, like just happy to see our personal growth through this, and happy that we're trying, that she's missed, but we're still trying to look at her and learn from her and how to better ourselves through this.
Absolutely. And when I think back through the past 3 months, I feel selfish sharing this because it's very me-centric, but then I also realize I have to allow myself to feel what I feel and be honest about what I'm feeling. And the way I felt is very alone in a lot of ways in my career, because of course, most of you know Bree was a prolific writer at the Federalist. That's how her and I met 3 years ago. I thought at the time we were the same age. Nope, turns out I was 3 years older than her. She was just so advanced in her career. And so mature and so kind-hearted. She carried herself like she was wise beyond her years. And we just immediately hit it off, I think, because, of course, we had so many interests and overlaps in our careers, but we are all lucky. I would say all of us here are lucky to be working in an industry where it's not just a job. It's so much more than that. I know on the issue of life, Bree was so passionate about that. And, our careers progressed very, very similarly in time. We both started doing Fox. I would say Bree was a little bit more advanced than me because she was so brave and so bold and would just go out there and do her thing. Meanwhile, I'm like shaking as I'm about to go on for the first couple times. But I looked up to Bree in so many ways because she really understood where I was in my career in a way that unfortunately nobody else did. And I was able to go to her with questions about how do you deal with a producer, or how do you deal with, the most mundane things that we deal with in our careers. And then beyond that, we formed such a relationship and such a friendship because our values were so aligned. And that's really where Bree opened the door for me to, I think, really grow into a better person, become stronger in my faith, challenge my faith, and actually commit to not just being a kind person. I always like to think I'm a pretty kind person, but actually commit to doing those acts of kindness where I know a lot of the eulogies that people spoke about Bree, actually, taking that step to helping someone who is homeless on the streets, buying them a sandwich. And it was so, it was so mind-boggling in a way, because we all knew that side of Bree here in DC. And then when we went out to California to her service there and got to know her family and heard these stories from her family, you realize she was the exact same person there. When her sister came to visit DC, she made sure that when a homeless person was hungry, her and her sister went and bought that woman a sandwich. And that's just who Bree is. And that's, to this day, I think what's gotten me through this is that Bree has inspired me to be a better person. I think about her every day, and I really think, if and when I raise a young girl, she's the type of person that I want that girl to be. So I would say that's how Bree is still living in my life and challenging me to be a better person. And that leads me to my next question. How do we find hope in this tragedy, and how do we make meaning of it?
So I think one of the things, actually really the primary thing, I can't think about Bree without thinking about her faith and how her faith inspired me and us. Yeah. And we were talking about it, what people were writing in eulogies and what people, were sharing on social media and all these different things, we got to experience from our living room couch. Right. I totally relate to you, Kelsey, in that she inspired on every level when it came to just living out your life as a human and in your career and all these different things. I was so inspired by her, and I admire her, and I want to be like her. And I felt that way when she was alive, and I feel that way now. Her spirit living on in heaven. So I can't think about her without thinking about heaven. And there were a couple instances, when we were together, where she would share so boldly, just like you said. And actually somebody close to her, when we were texting, after she passed away, somebody close to her texted me and said, Bree was so bold, and she was so bold because her brand was God, and she didn't care what people thought about that, or and she lived like that, and that was in every medium. When she was on Fox speaking to millions, when she was just with us in a room,
right on our living room couch,
right. And so, I can't think about Bree without thinking about heaven. And actually, one of the things that really spoke to me, this was the first weekend that we were back in our apartment, and we were obviously, the devastation runs so deep, and it was so deep for us, so I can't imagine what it was like for so many others, like you all and the Federalist and her family. But I was sitting on our couch, just recognizing, the huge void that now exists. And so I thought, well, what would Bree do? Almost in a way, in something like this. And I actually, I went to the Psalms for comfort, which I feel like a lot of people can relate to. It's one of those it gives you these, sort of precious scriptures to rely on when you're, feeling all different kinds of things. And so I flopped open this giant Bible that I have, and I opened up to Psalm 116, and my eyes just fell right to this verse that says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. And I thought, I actually have no idea what that means. So it was very strange to me, like, why would that be precious? And so I did a little bit of research on it. And actually what it meant in that time period, scholars read that as saying the Lord recognizes when he lifts a saint from earth, the gap that's going to be left. He doesn't do it haphazardly. He knows the consequence of their life. And he knows the pain that her friends are going to feel, that her family is going to feel. And there's somehow purpose in it. And so honestly, in the past 3 months, I can't let go of that, because Bree was the best of us. You know, like, we can all say that. I think that she was one of those people, again, like, just strangers, you know, they would feel a connection to her, because really, I think Bree lived in light of eternity. Bree lived for heaven.
Yes.
And so ultimately, I think that the pain is so real, and as humans, the grief is so real. But the hope is that that there's heaven, and everybody who knows Bree knows that she believed in that. And so for me, that's been, you know, that I can't help but think of heaven.
Yeah, and I think that there was a real physical manifestation of that when Brianna and I were sitting on our couch after Bree passed, and we were talking about Bree's life and the impact that she had on people. And even just looking over and realizing there were two of us now sitting on the couch that three of us used to sit on, and we all kind of had our own spots on the couch, our own blankets. Whenever we would watch TV, we would have sort of our, you know, our assigned seats that we claimed. And looking over and seeing, you know, only two, I think really kind of drove home the significance. I actually took it as something really powerful that there were three of us and one was called home. And I could just, you know, hear God say, you know, well done, good and faithful servant. And you two, there's more work to be done here for you both. So I think, yeah, there's so much hope. I think one of the things that made Bree so attractive to everyone she met was that she was just hopeful and kind, and she was hope incarnate. I think people, especially in DC, because it is, you know, a rough, difficult place at times. I think people want hope, and she was hope, and she is hope still, since, you know, the hope that lived in Bree and that Bree showed to others was Jesus, and that hope never dies. So people can still hope in her, even though she's, you know, not here anymore. Her legacy is, and I think of that as hope perfected, that she was hope and she still is hope, and now that hope is perfected, so people can still find comfort in the same old Bree. It's just now more perfect.
I think that, you know, the common theme of faith being woven between how all of us feel is really the only thing that has the power to get us through something like this. And I don't know about you guys, but one thing that constantly runs through my head almost daily is, why her and not me? Yeah. And I think I identify with that even more because every time I go over to Fox News, I know this could have been her. Why isn't it her today? Why is it me? And I think it's only time that will heal. I don't think I'll ever have the answer to that. But somebody else does, and that person is God, and we just have to put our faith in God, that he had bigger plans for her and for us. That, Kat, you're exactly right, that he wasn't done with us down here, and we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of work to live up to the ideal of Bree.
I want to thank Kat and Brianna. We got beer last night, and we were talking. I've seen a lot of people grow closer to God, and her services were beautiful, and how confident people were. And I don't think that I was like ever grew farther apart from God through this, but I just never had that like, yes, Lord, I trust you. It was like, okay, God, like if this is what we have to do, like this is what we have to do. And there was like an anger to it, and there was a like confusion to it. But what they helped me realize last night is that this has been so great for my faith because it made it real. I think there's a C.S. Lewis sermon called The Weight of Glory that talks about, besides the Holy Communion, the holiest items on the earth are humans, and how we treat every person. We're talking to immortal beings, and the idea that every interaction you have, and I think Bree saw this clearly, and so thinking through my relationship with God and Bree's relationship with God and what I can learn, this hope of we are eternal, and Bree is in heaven, and heaven's this great place, and her perfect body is, and we will all be united, but also too that we are down here, and we do continue our mission, and that we have the opportunity to continue to reach people like Bree did, and it adds a weight to you, and I like the way that C.S. Lewis calls that the weight of glory, but it's also freeing in a sense that we can make a difference, and even in the worst suffering that I've had to experience in my life, God is still working through us, and God is there, and yeah, it's just it's a lot to think about, but I think changes the way that you interact with every person that you meet. Just to pivot one more thing, I think what we're doing here is important, and I don't want anyone to think that we are, just trying to, Bree's have had so many beautiful eulogies, and there's been so many great tributes, and I don't want this podcast to be just another tribute to Bree, because we could spend the next 10 years doing a weekly podcast about how beautiful Bree was and how special she was. Yeah. But I really wanted to take this opportunity to talk about grief and be honest and show particularly young women that this is hard and suffering is good. And you have to learn from Bree and learn from grief. And if you have a friend right now who might be struggling with grief, might be struggling with depression, anxiety, any of these issues that are internal, I just have on my heart that I really would encourage you and challenge you to reach out to those friends, and don't smother them. Don't put too much attention on them, but just reach out to them and say, hey, I see you. I see your problems, and I want to let you know I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you, and just be there. And I think as society, the more that we can be real, and we're not this fake, oh, I'm happy today, everything's great, look at my Instagram, we're all smiling. The more that we can really dig into each other's problems and love each other through it, I think a lot of these divisions that we see are going to come together. So I just hope listening to this, I hope you leave it sad, I hope you leave it hopeful, but I hope you just really want to change and want to be better.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Before we transition into the next segment, I want to say, in thinking through what Bree would want us to be and how she would want us to live in her absence, I wrote down Bree would want us to be bold, to be curious, to be kind, and to never apologize for what we believe. Thank you all for sharing. I know this is not easy to talk about, but as hard as it is for us, we only knew Bree for a few short years and can only imagine what it's like for her family. So when we come back, we will have Bree's mom, Cindy Peyton, on the line. Hi, Cindy. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Kelsey.
So on the line here, we have Lauren Evans and Bree's former roommates, who I know you know well, Kat and Brianna.
Hi, Cindy.
Yes.
Cindy.
Hi, ladies. How are you doing?
Good.
Good to hear your voice.
You too, Bree.
So I'm going to let all of them jump in, but I'd love to start this interview just by asking you if you could share how you are doing personally, how your family is doing, and how you all are coping with such a huge loss of this beautiful soul.
Yes, well, I'm feeling, I'd say, they say you have good days and bad days, and I've been doing I would say really strong, and it's because of our faith. I said, geez, if we didn't have just faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus and knowing that Brianna is in heaven, I probably would despair of any kind of hope or anything. But that is what keeps us going. And her sister, her sisters are doing well. Cheekie, her 17-year-old sister, is finishing up her senior year in high school and will be going to King's College in the fall in New York, so she's looking forward to that. But of course, missing Bree because she set it up to go to New York, so they could meet and that kind of thing. James and Jack, the boys, are doing well. George is doing well. Again, it's a lot of prayer, a lot of prayers by our friends that are helping us get through this.
Yeah, Cindy, you've been so strong through all of this. I know just right before you called, we were talking about how your strength has really enabled us to be stronger.
It's infectious.
It really is. And I think Bree was like that too. And her strength and her faith while she was alive just really inspires us and continues to inspire us. Can you just go deeper about what your faith means to you and how it allows you to be so strong?
It means, I think of the verse, that when Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you may be also. And I think of Bree, my gosh, in my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going off the top of my head here. I've memorized since I was a kid, so you won't get chapter and verse necessarily from me. But, so I know that the Lord is preparing places for all of us who believe, for all of us who have faith and believe in, his work on the cross and his life, that he lived the perfect life to make that atonement, to be that sacrificial lamb, if you will. And so those of us that believe and have faith will be with him again. And I know for Brianna, that was her number one thing. She and George would have these conversations especially the last year of her life. And she said, gosh, Dad, I know I'm going to go to heaven. I just want to, make sure. I know my faith, I will be there, but that's the most important thing to me. And I thought, who at 26 is so heaven-minded that they just think, that's where I want to be. I just want to be with Jesus. I want to be with the Lord. And that was who she was and what she was about. And as I read through, she kept journals and diaries. And it's funny because I didn't realize how many she had kept. And, they grew up watching me keep journals and diaries and records kind of thing. I have quite a few. And Bree did the same thing. So in reading through and just her desire to just grow closer with God and grow closer in her walk with the Lord. And it's just, that's comforting to me, going, wow, she really lived it out. And her compassion out on the street, she lived as Christ would live, lived out her faith, helping those who were less fortunate. It's interesting. We went and saw the movie Unplanned this weekend. And I thought, oh my gosh, I was crying because I thought, gosh, Bree would have been the first one in the theaters to see that. And she was all about, as I went through her apartment with her sister, Christina, and I was just talking to Kat and Brianna and saying, gosh, look at this. She filled this whole notebook. She was studying to be a crisis pregnancy counselor, and she had just finished all of the coursework and was basically set to be on the schedule to be, in the clinic and being able to counsel young women in crisis pregnancy. So I thought, wow, this movie would have just been the cherry on the top for her. It would have been great.
Cindy, one thing I want to ask you is, you're so strong. Your strength is beautiful. Your smile is infectious. Every time we would come home from work and see you during that week that you were helping move out her things, we took heart in that. You're just so strong. How do you have that strength in the midst of the suffering, and especially when you have young kids, a family that rely on you still?
Again, it goes back to, I remember being with my grandparents and them telling me Bible stories, and my mom having me memorize scripture before there was Awana and all the great programs that they have at the church. This is back in the 70s when I grew up. And so my mom would have me memorized scripture. And she said, this is the word of God. This is what you draw on. And I memorized a lot. And so it's that scripture. Through the day, sometimes I'll feel sad or start to cry, and I'll let myself go ahead and cry. And then I remember, just that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And I know that although we can't see how, it's like, how would this fit into a good plan of taking Bree at 26? I know that it does work together for good. I can't see the big picture. God knows, past, present, future, and he sees all time, at once, if it were. And he knows how everything fits. And for his ultimate purpose and glory, that Brianna, her mission, if you will, was finished at 26. And knowing that she lived, she was so strong, and she lived just so passionate and packed so much in her life. When she would come and visit, I'd say, Bree, take it easy. She's like, Mom, no. And she just had this hamster on a wheel kind of mentality.
That's how she described it to me herself. She described that to me in one of our last major conversations we had. She says, I feel like a hamster on a wheel, but she wanted to be like that right now, to live as much as she could before it was time to have a family of her own and take care of them. She wanted to pack her life in with so much, and she did.
You can see so much of Bree in you, Cindy, too. Bree makes so much sense after meeting
Absolutely.
you, too. It's remarkable.
Oh my gosh. It was so much fun being back in DC with you girls and Christina, and having like those 4 days to just not only just process and go through things, but to hear the stories and to, go over memories. And it was just really, really a great and special time that I'll always remember.
Yeah, those were such precious moments to us. And it's crazy because Bree lived she squeezed everything out of life. And she has such a legacy. Everybody who touched her life that she touched knows that, and knows the impact that they have. It's kind of, I really think, remarkable and unheard of for somebody so young to have such a wide-reaching impact that she did. And clearly, like you said, Cindy, on mission. And so there's a scholarship fund that I know that y'all started. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that as sort of a way to continue her legacy and to inspire the next generation, which we know was something that was really close to Bree's heart. Maybe you could tell us about that.
Yes. So we set up through GoFundMe, the Bre Payton Memorial Scholarship Fund, and we set it with a goal of $50,000, which we hit a couple of weeks back. So exciting.
Yay!
Truly amazing. And in the midst of all of that, Patrick Henry College, which was Bree's alma mater, reached out to us and said within just hours of her death, they had a donor through a private foundation that came forward and reached out to Patrick Henry, said, I know this was her alma mater, and whatever money that you're able to raise into the scholarship for Bree, we will match it.
Oh my gosh.
So
I have
we wrote a
goosebumps.
check. Is that amazing? So
That's
we wrote a check.
fantastic.
We sent it last week. We sent it to Patrick Henry. They received it, and they said, yep, they're working with the donor to get that matched, which basically means it will be funded, this endowment, if you will be funded pretty much into perpetuity. It will be, a lasting legacy where they will be able to give out scholarships every year to journalism students. And they didn't have any scholarships for journalism students up to this point. So that is super exciting.
That's
that
so
her
beautiful.
Message, that her voice of conservatism and spreading the gospel through what she did, even if she wasn't preaching the literal words of Christ, how she acted and how she lived out her life was a witness to him. So we're really excited about that.
So donating to this scholarship and making it known is certainly one way to help Bree's legacy live on. I'm curious from your perspective, now that we're over 3 months out from Bree's passing, how can people continue to support families like yours. Unfortunately, you're not the only family who has experienced a loss like this. And I think, many of us on the other side who look at families like yours, we want to help in some way. And we know how to do that in the couple weeks after. But then, a couple months out, when perhaps the family needs it the most, a lot of us are at a loss for what we can do.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I was just thinking that last week. If I were to, I'm always having this, if I were to write a book on, and I have, like 3 books in my mind, okay, I'm going to eventually write a book. But if I were to write a book on this, or a little pamphlet, I would say it's reaching out with tangible things. For instance, I had a couple girlfriends that have text messaged me just in the last week or so and said, okay, the initial kind of, for lack of a better word, hullabaloo or whatever, all of the, has passed, and now it's just kind of quiet. I would love to bring you, and one of my friends makes a mean potted chili. I would love to bring you guys chili and cornbread, but same tangible stuff, not even, like, what are you good at? Like, volunteer that. I was thinking, my gosh, we have a big box that literally we've put all the cards and letters. Oh my gosh, there are hundreds of them. And we started to go through them, and it's just kind of overwhelming. And so I think, okay, one girlfriend came and went through a few of them with me, just tangible stuff. Hey, have you read through all the cards and letters that, your loved one received? Would you like me to go through those with you? Can I come over? And a friend came over and walked my dogs for me. Can I come and walk your dog? Yes. Oh,
your
my
poodles.
gosh. Can I come in? Little things like that mean so much. Can I come? Another girlfriend said, can I just come and sit with you while you go through like your office? Balance all your QuickBooks, just kind of tangible things, but just think, okay, offer like specific things, because if you need anything, let me know. I am not going to call any of those people, because I don't want to. We all live busy lives. We all, have a lot to do. And so I'm probably not going to call any of those favors in. But those that reach out tangible things, yeah. And like you said, especially a few months later, and to remember the dates. Like, I have different friends that have texted me on like the first month after she passed, the second month, the third month. And my daughter, Christina, goes to the cemetery, oh gosh, every week or every other week. And just we'll place flowers. We'll just go and spend time with her. So she literally drives by the cemetery to and from work every day. So that's really sweet. But yeah, I would say the offering tangible things that that might mean something. Even if it sounds weird, like pray about it and go, okay, all right, God, I'll just offer that. And just make an offer of it. Trips, like friends taking Jack. I homeschooled all my kids, but Jack goes to Friday school, and friends that have stepped in and done rides, that have taken him out to lunch, that have, hey, we're going to go see a movie. Can we take Jack? Yes. To get him out, of the house too, and to have him have special time with friends and all that kind of stuff really helped a lot.
Yeah. Cindy, there are so many signs of Bree that we see throughout DC, just in our daily lives. And I'm sure you see that, but just tenfold back in California. What are some of the signs that you kind of see, that that Bree's kind of looking out from heaven, and just any reminders that you get from her?
Oh, it's so funny you say that, because last week we were looking out. We have this really cool fountain in our backyard, and the birds, and George won't put chemicals in it. I said, oh, put chemicals so it doesn't get green. He goes, no, I'll just clean it out and scrub it, because I don't want to poison the birds. And
that's thoughtful.
I just put a little chlorine in their mouth. It's not going to hurt them. There's no chemicals, fresh water for the birds. So the birds will come, and we've been getting like so many cool, like yellow birds, and just like colors that we haven't seen before.
Wow.
And just amazing. And Bree would sit there, and we would talk about how much we loathe the idea of like cage birds in the house, just the mess and everything, and just not as a bird. But like out in nature, she's like, out in nature, they're totally fine. They're cute, not in my house, kind of a thing. And so Christina was like, oh my gosh, when you see birds or when you see stuff, does it remind you of Bree? And I said, okay, when I'm prompted to do something, like I was at the gas station last week, and there was this guy there delivering, it was like 11, or I'm a late night owl, so it was like probably close to midnight. So I'm getting gas, and this guy was there delivering donuts for the next day, and just super nice guy, and just I was just kind of struck, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bless him. So we went out, and he told me he had 2 kids and that kind of thing. I always get the backstory like Bree would, so I know his whole history almost. So I went to my purse and got some money, and I went to him. He goes, I can't take money. I go, this isn't for me. This is for you. Like, go take your kids to a movie, take them out to dinner, go do something fun. I said, this is not for you. Because I'm like, okay, he's working. I don't know if he could accept it, but I go, this is for your kids. And I thought that's totally like Bree, because we would be out together, and she would, when she was little, she'd say, Mom, there's a guy with a sign, or there's a guy with a this. And, she would make little lunches that we would pass out. We did that for a time so that we weren't actually handing money. Other times we would hand money out. But so anytime kind of I see that kind of situation, I think of Bree. And, what would she do? She would totally reach out. She would help. She would, there's a homeless lady who kind of roams our city from time to time. Her name is Sally. And I was at Kohl's, and I saw the cutest red dress. And I'm like, oh, that would totally fit Sally. So I bought it. And my daughter's like, wait, you bought a dress for a homeless lady? I go, it was a prompting. What can I say? So I drove around looking for her. And then I saw her one day. I'm like, oh my gosh, Sally. I reached in the trunk. I handed her the dress, and she's like, oh, this is so me. How did you know? I'm like, oh, I just a little prompting, and gave that to her. And so it's just kind of, when I get those little promptings from the Lord, and also I think, Bree's tied into that too. So it's just really fun. You can't outgive God, as they say. And Bree just loves to help, those around her. And so when I see people like that in those situations, I totally think of Bree.
That's so sweet and so Bree. Cindy, I want to ask, we've been talking about how we remember Bree and how we want to be like Bree. We want to hear from you. How do you want her friends in DC and the people she worked with and the people that she knew, how should they remember Bree?
Okay, I asked my husband this morning when he was getting ready to go to work, and I said, okay, dear, what would you say? And he said, okay, well, first of all, that Bree lived her life by her moral convictions. She didn't have, and when she was writing or on the news, he said she didn't have a narrative that she was pushing. She was simply telling the story how it was, not how she wanted to do it, not how she wanted it to be. She didn't twist it. He said it was like real journalism back in the day when you would see people just reporting on the news or just telling the story. That's what she did, and she did it very well. And I mean, she called out Trump when she didn't like what he was doing. She called out different things. She called out people from both sides of the aisle, and lived by her convictions. And we're going over the kids and I and George what we want on her memorial, on her gravestone, if you will. And so I said, okay, well, we want it to say strong, clear, bright one, which is what her name meant.
Of course.
Yes.
She was a Christ follower, compassionate, writer, journalist, loving daughter, sister, girlfriend, French fry queen.
In and out.
Yeah, messy eater. And we thought, okay, and the scripture I think that would best sum up her life is from Philippians 1:21, and it says, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain."
Amen to that.
That sums up her life. She has gained, and yes, she is living in glory, and will welcome all of us as we join her over the next years and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
I can't wait to see her again. And I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on the podcast and share all this. I know it's not easy, but we are so grateful that you are helping us remember Bree in such a beautiful way. I know her family over at the Federalist keeps her very close to their hearts. They send their love. Everybody here at the Daily Signal, who she produces podcasts with, we all send our love. Please tell your family that we are here for them. We hear from people every day who ask us how you all are doing. So I think it will mean a lot to everybody to hear your voice and hear that you are holding up. And we will continue to spread the word about the scholarship and pray for your entire family.
Thanks, Kelsey. Thank you so much. You and Lauren are and Brianna and Kat, you ladies are just such sweethearts. So thanks for being with me today.
We love you, Cindy.
We love you, Cindy.
Love you too.
That's it for this week's edition of Problematic Women. Special thanks to Lauren Evans, Kat Nikas, and Brianna Herlihy for joining me today.
Thanks
Thanks so much, Kelsey.
Make sure to join us next Thursday morning for a brand new edition of Problematic Women. And in the meantime, please subscribe and share. Conservatives need your support in the podcast world, and we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It really does make a difference.
Have a great week, and thank you for helping us to remember our dear friend, Bree.
This podcast was created by The Daily Signal, produced by Kelsey Bolar and Lauren Evans. Edited by Michael Gooden and Thalia Rampersad. Special thanks to The Daily Signal's editor-in-chief, Katrina Trinko. Looking for a short morning podcast to give you the news of the day without liberal bias? The Daily Signal podcast is a rundown of the top stories you need to know that the mainstream media is probably ignoring.